Shalom everyone, hope everyone's doing well. Be'ezat Hashem, today in Masechet Sanhedrin we're going to continue on from the bottom of Chaf Bet Amud Aleph until Chaf Bet Amud Bet, about halfway down the page. We're going to have two sections in the learning today. First is really a continuum from yesterday, talking about a man and his relationship with his wife, specifically about loss and about how difficult it is to make zivugim in the first place. And the second section will focus back on the Mishnah, which had said the person is not allowed to watch the king when he gets a haircut, and we'll speak about the frequency of a haircut for the king amongst others. So we'll see that B'ezrat Hashem in the Gemara. Our learning should be as a zechut, as a merit for Refuah Shleima for Yaakov ben Dina, and we should only hear B'sorot Tovot soon in our days. Now, we are starting Chaf Bet Amud Aleph, Amar Rabba, which is 6 lines from the bottom of the page. We left off yesterday discussing the severity and the difficulty of losing one's wife or divorce, etc., the negativities involved in that. So the Gemara picks up today on a more positive note, but also something that's difficult is the difficulty that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, kiviyachol, as if to say, in making shidduchim. It's a very interesting idea. So let's see this inside. Amar Rabba bar bar Chana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar bar Chana says in the name of his Rebbe, Rabbi Yochanan, Kashel is Afgan ki kriyat yam suf. Kiviyachol, as if to say, the difficulty Hashem has in making zivugim, shidduchim, making matches of a man and a woman, is difficult like the degree of kriyat yam suf, of splitting the sea. Almost to say it's like against nature. How do we know that there's such a comparison? Shene'emar, because the pasuk tells us in Tehillim, it says, Elokim moshiv yichidim baita, beta. It says Hashem sits individuals in the house, meaning he takes 2 individuals and puts them together, i.e. makes a zivug. Motzi asirim bekosharot. He brings out those who were bound bekosharot, in chains. So now let's read the parentheses. Al tikri motzi asirim. Don't read it that he brings out those in chains. Ela kimotzi asirim means like bringing those out from those who were prisoners, who were in chains. And al tikri bekosharot, and don't read it in kosharot, in chains, ela bechi v'shirot. Kosharot is an acronym. It means crying and song. It refers to Kriyat Yam Suf, is that the Jews were singing song by Kriyat Yam Suf, and the Mitzrayim were crying because they were being destroyed. So the way you put the psukim together now is to say, just like Motzi Asirim, like those people, like the Jewish people when they were taken out, bechi v'shirot, i.e. at Kriyat Yam Suf, so too is the difficulty, as if to say, Hashem has in Moshiv Yechidim Abaita, when Hashem puts individuals together, meaning creating marriages. It's a very fascinating idea that the difficulty involved, and therefore the outcome is the appreciation we have to find your zivug is a tremendous thing. So the Gemara says from this it would imply that it's not predicted, actually, that it's not preordained, or that it's not fate when it comes to a marriage, but rather there's this element of difficulty, or as the Gemara in Sotah calls it, because the same sugya appears there, that there's this idea that it's lefi ma'asim. It's like according to one's deeds, his good deeds or not good deeds, chas v'shalom, he also gets a wife. So that's the Gemara. Is that true? Eini v'ha'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, but Rav Yehuda Amar Rav says 40 yom kodem yitzirat havlad, 40 days before the formation of a child, bat kol yotzeit ve'omeret, a heavenly echo emerges and states, bat ploni leploni, daughter of Ploni is for Ploni, meaning it's preordained, it's preordained, it's already predicted beforehand. So how can you tell me that there's this difficulty in making shidduchim if in fact we find that it's actually fate, it's preordained? So the Gemara answers, Lo kashya, habezug rishon, the bat kol is referring to zug rishon. We're going to learn kipshuto, at least a simple pshat, which is the first marriage that a person has is something that's preordained, that there's the match that's made up in heaven that's predicted and that's announced in advance. And habezug sheni, but this that we're saying, it's according to your deeds, it's difficult, that is zug sheni. If there's a second marriage, that's something that is not preordained, but rather is something with the difficulty level as we've expressed previously in the Gemara. Very interesting idea. Let's continue. Amar Shmuel bar Nachman, L'kol yesh t'mura, back to the idea of losing one's wife, the severity and difficulty involved. Rav Shmuel Bar Nachman says, L'kol yesh t'mura, everything could have an exchange, chutz me'eshet neorim, besides for the wife of one's youth. There's nothing that can replace that. Unbelievable. Like it says in Yeshaya, ve'eshet neorim ki tima'es, the wife of your youth that you discussed in it. Meaning to say is that that's something that can never be replaced, something that cannot be replicated. Matni la Rav Yehuda Rav Yitzchak Berei. Rav Yehuda taught his son Rav Yitzchak, Ein adam motzei korat ruach ela mi'ishto rishona. A person only finds a korat ruach. Sorry, just 1 second. Sorry, just to be clear, the previous pasuk, Kitima Es, means it's like a question. Could you replace, can you cast her off? That's the idea. It's like asked as like a rhetorical question. You can't replace the wife of your youth. Matni Rav Yehuda taught his son Rav Yitzchak the following. Ein adam motzei korat ruach ela mi'ishto rishona. A person only finds a sense of genuine comfort, pleasure in his first wife. A very interesting idea here. This is what Rav Yehuda taught his son Rav Yitzchak. Shene'emar, like it says in the pasuk, Mishlei, it says, Yehi mekorcha baruch, your source will be blessed, you'll receive blessing, usmach, and you'll rejoice, me'eshet ne'urayich, from the wife of your youth. The point is that the wife of your youth is what gives the greatest pleasure, the greatest enjoyment. Amar lo, so Rav Yitzchak turned to his father and he said, Kegon man, for example whom? What's a good example of this? Amar lo, Kegon imecha, like your mother. Rav Yehuda said, like your mother, she was the wife of my youth, and she gave me the greatest pleasure, the greatest satisfaction, the greatest comfort, as you could call it. 1 second. Very interesting. Let's continue. So the Gemara says, Eini, is this true that Rav Yehuda's wife gave him such pleasure? But Rav Yehuda taught his son Rav Yitzchak the following thing. He taught him, the pasuk says, Umotzi ani mar mi mavet, I find more bitter than death, et ha'isha asher hi mitzudim v'charamim, the woman that is full of traps and snares. V'amar lo, and Rav Yitzchak said to his father, Kegon man, for example, whom? V'amar leis, Rav Yehuda said back, Kegon imecha, for example, your mother. So it seems to be, a very interesting thing to say, but it seemed to be that Rav Yehuda's wife gave him problems. So the Gemara answers, Mitkif tekifa. She was indeed a very strong-natured woman, difficult, but ibure ma'abra b'mila, she was easygoing, or she was forgiving in her matters, and therefore it was okay. I just looked, very interesting. Ben Yoyada explains that in nature, Rav Yehuda's wife was easily angered or a bitter person. But at the same time, she overcame these negative character traits, and therefore, because of that, Rav Yehuda treasured his relationship with her because she gave him such pleasure. Very interesting idea. Very interesting idea the Gemara is highlighting here. So therefore, actually, both were true, is that she had a certain nature that was difficult, but she overcame that, and that's why he says it was the greatest korat ruach in relation to your mother. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Shmuel bar Onya mishmei derav, Isha golem hi. A woman is considered golem. Rashi understands golem is a kli, a vessel that's not completed. We find this in the halachot of Tumah and Tahara. An incomplete vessel. We're going to see she's considered incomplete until she marries and has relations with her husband. Ve'ena koretet berit el lemisha asa kli. She only creates a treaty or a deep relationship with someone who makes her into a vessel, i.e. the man she has relations with. Shene'emar, like it says in Yeshaya, ki bo'alayich osayich. This is relations to the connection between Hashem and the Jewish people, as if a man and a woman. It says bo'alayich osayich, the one who has relations with you, he has formed you. Hashem tzvakot shemo, Hashem, of Master of Legions, is his name. So the point is that Hashem, in this relationship, is considered like the husband, and the Jewish people are like the wife. That also is, in some way, he makes the Jewish people in having relations with them. Tana continues the Braita, Ein isha meita el ishto, Ein ish meita el ishto, ve'ein isha meita el ba'ala. A husband, a man only dies for his wife or regarding his wife, and a woman only dies for her husband, meaning the one who feels the suffering the most is the spouse. Where do we find the example of this? A man only dies for his wife. She feels the greatest suffering and loss. They find in Ruth, it says, Vayamat Elimelech ish Naami. It says, Elimelech, who was the husband of Naami, passed away. It highlights ish Naami because she's the one that felt the most lost. The ain't isha meta el ba'ala, and a woman only dies for her husband, meaning in regards to her husband, that's where the greatest loss is felt. Shne'emar, as it says in the pasuk in Vayechi, Yaakov says, "Va'ani bevoi mi Padan." When I came from Padan, meta alai Rachel, Rachel passed away. So he said, she died on me, for me, means I was the one who felt the greatest loss because I was her husband. Let's continue, moving on to the next section. It said in the Mishnah, to keep the greatest respect for the king, ein ro'in oto, we're not allowed to look at him when he gets a haircut. Tanu Rabbanan, says the Braita, Melech mistaper b'chol yom, a king has to get a haircut every day. Kohen Gadol me'erev Shabbat le'erev Shabbat, Kohen Gadol has to get a haircut every Friday. Kohen Hedjot, and an ordinary Kohen echad l'shloshim yom, once every 30 days. So let's go through how do we know the sources for this. Melech mistaper b'chol yom, a king gets a haircut every day. Shneimar, because in Yeshaya the pasuk says, Melech b'yofyo techazena einecha. A king in his beauty your eyes should see. Meaning, anyone who looks at the king has to see him in his most beautified state, and therefore he needs to get a haircut every day. Again, a similar idea to like Som Tasim Alecha Melch. You have to see him in his greatest grandeur and the greatest beauty, therefore he needs to get a haircut every day. Kohen Gadol me'erev Shabbat le'erev Shabbat. We said a Kohen Gadol gets a haircut every Friday. Amar Shmuel bar Nachman, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Hoelu mishmarot mitchadshot, because the mishmarot would change. There were 24 mishmarot, or watches of the Kohanim, and each one of these watches would serve in the Beit HaMikdash every week. Every week it would change. Now they would change on Shabbat. So in order that the incoming mishmar would see the Kohen Gadol in his most beautiful state, he would get a haircut on Friday, so when the new mishmar would show up, they would see him in his glorious state. Now, Kohen Hedjot, Kohen Hedjot, ordinary Kohen would get a haircut every 30 days. How do we know this? Because the pasuk tells us in Yecheskel. It says, V'rosham lo yigalechu. It says, their heads they shall not shave. Upera lo yishalechu. Now, this is the key part of the pasuk. Upera lo yishalechu. It says, they shall not send forth a pera, tresses, growth of hair. Now, what does that refer to? Kisom yechsimu et rashehem, they should trim their hair. The Yalef pera min Nazir. So we derive what is pera from Nazir. Because K'tivach, it says by the Kohen in Yecheskel, like we just quoted, pera lo yishalechu, they can't send forth a growth. So what is that growth? Because it says by the Nazir, Gadel pera sa'ar rosho. It says the growth of pera of the hair of their head. So we know by a Nazir, Mala Alan, just as by Nazir, the minimum Nazirut of Pera is 30 days. That's the minimum time frame a Nazir has to let his hair grow long. Afkan Shloshim, Mala Alan Shloshim, Afkan Shloshim. So too, when we plug it back in the Pasuk, Upera lo yishalechu, it means also that the growth of a Kohen could only be up to 30 days, but not more than that. It's an anami, like the Mishnah illustrates by the Nazir, Stam Nazirut Shloshim Yom, the minimal Nazirut, the normal Nazirut is 30 days. You could have more than that, but therefore the word Pera teaches us from Nazir to Kohen in Yecheskel that it has to be only up to 30 days. So the Gemara says, Vahata minal, and how do we know by Nazir that it has to be a minimum of 30 days? Amar Matna da Amar Kra, because the Pasuk says, Kadosh Yihiyeh, it says, it shall be holy. Now, Yihiyeh, by the Nazir, it says in Parashat Naso, Begematria, Yihiyeh Begematria is very interesting. The Gemara doesn't very often do this. One of the few sources where we find that you learn a halacha from a Gematria, not very common. It's Latin Havu. So we learn that the halacha is 30 days by a Nazir, that's the Stam Nazirut, the minimum amount of Nazirut. Through Gzerah Shava of Pera, we learn that the Kohen also has to cut his hair every 30 days. Amar le bigmatriat Latin. Amahavu. Amar le Reb Papa Labai. Reb Papa says to Abaye, Eima, but maybe I'll argue and I'll say the following. Lo lirbu klal. Now Reb Papa says to Abaye the following. Maybe the way you read the pasuk in Yecheskel by the Kohen is like this. Upera lo yishalechu. It shouldn't even reach 30 days. Meaning maybe really the obligation is that he has to cut his hair even earlier than that. Maybe he can't send forth tresses, means he can't send forth nothing near 30 days. Maybe he has to cut it every day. And either there's a Gzerah Shava, maybe he doesn't hold a Gzerah Shava. But the kasha is, maybe he shouldn't cut his hair at all. Maybe he shouldn't allow his hair to grow at all. So Amar Le, so Rabbi said back like this, based on the verse we know it's saying you're allowed to let it grow up to a certain point, because ichtiv lo yishalechu pera. If it would have first said lo yishalechu and then pera, don't send forth and then pera kidika amrit. So you could say lo yishalechu means you can't grow it out at all, and then maybe you'll say you have to get a haircut every day or every 10 days. But hashta dichtiv, says Abaye, but now that it says first upera, and then it says lo yishalechu. So the way we expound it is like this: upera means pera lihave. It could be like pera, as explained by Nazir, which is 30 days. But shluche lo lishlechi. But it can't be beyond that. You can't let it grow more than that. I.e., you could only let it grow up to 30 days, but not beyond 30 days. So upera, kama, you could let it grow 30 days, but lo yishalechu, not beyond that. I.e., you can't grow more than 30 days. And we're going to stop here. Bet in the middle of the page. The Gemara is going to continue on with this question and say, today there should be also an issue, according to this, for Kohanim to let their hair grow beyond 30 days, but Bezat Hashem will pick up with that tomorrow. In the meantime, we're stopping Chaf Bet in the middle of the page, and everyone have a wonderful day.